Yeah, I was on myself 200, but after that, I mean, what's that last? Awfully quiet over there.
Slow down and
I know, we discussed all this.
so we really have nothing to talk about.
I don't even know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
Henry Champlin,
Present.
Bill Powell,
Commissioner Powell had a work matter he was answering, so he won't be here.
Maddie Cole,
I have not spoken to Commissioner Coble, so I assume she.
Ray Cruz,
Present.
Dave Richard,
Here.
Scott Morris.
Here. Well, good evening. And right off, I'd like to thank Dave for the information that he brought back from Vegas. Thank you very much. Very informative. I see I can't vote anymore.
There's never a tie. There's only 6 people. There'll never be a tie.
That's why you made that trip. Anyway, thank you. General discussion, financials, and staff report.
The Housing Authority for the month of January had a $104,000 loss. That is exclusively because we paid our quarterly insurance bill, which is about $106,000. So, with the exception of that one payment, we would have actually had basically a break-even month of about $2,000. Year to date, we have about a $287,000 net profit. That's from our two programs. The Section 8 program has about an $84,000 loss year to date, and Public Housing program has about an $882,000 net profit year to date. Of course, the central office has around $500,000 in allocated overhead expenses that gets, it kind of eats up the rest of that profit there. But overall, for the month, that loss was entirely related to our insurance payments. We do pay that quarterly, so there will be 3 more payments of around of the exact same price that will take place during that time period. Are there any questions on the financials?
Just, I think you've explained this before, but maybe again, it shows like the budget and then actual, and it shows like maintenance contracts, like $400,000 to the good, and maintenance materials kind of same. I think you've explained that to us before, but can you do that again?
And it's a favorite question of Commissioner Richards as well. The reason is that we get to tie a lot of our maintenance expenses up in our capital. So because that's an operating financial sheet, it doesn't show the capital expenses. We will add those back on so that you can see exactly where those will fall. And actually, I owe you guys that piece of information so you can see the breakout of the difference. But trust me, we are definitely spending the money. Are there any other questions? Any questions on the
No, go ahead.
Any questions on the list of bills?
I think there was like a $600 work shoes or safety shoes. Is that for every?
Not for everyone, but the maintenance, all the maintenance employees are part of the union. As part of their union contract, we provide them $600 for safety. Are there any other questions?
You know, one of the things that they did talk about at the conference, and I think might go to Scott's question, and that might hang on the maintenance a lot, would be to, could we see like the maintenance plan or the breakout of, you know, like when, what is the maintenance plan for the units? Like how often do you know, replace replace the HVAC systems, is on a set schedule, or do we do it as needed, or, like, some of that info, I think would be helpful for us to be able to see.
Absolutely, and one of the things that I've already started to do is go through the list of items there and look at what we do have and what we don't have, and obviously we'll have to put, it's a significant list of things we'll probably need to kind of touch on. So we'll have to put together a plan on how to address those, especially in talking about basically we do need a full review of our agency policies, and those kinds of things. So there'll be a broader list that gets out, but in regards to that specifically, we do a lot of, we do have plan for room maintenance. It's probably not as well defined as it should be, but definitely we know when the guys, whenever they are instructed to take a look around and see if they notice anything that needs fixed. But I don't know that we have a explicit written out plan that's current, if anything. So we really need to address a current plan, especially given our strategic plan, what we plan to do. We probably need to have a plan that is part of that.
Other questions?
I'm sorry, I'm moving these staff notes.
Staff report.
The Housing Authority, as the board knows, has started the negotiation process on our voluntary compliance agreement with HUD in relationship to the Jericho development. Our attorneys, myself, have been working to really cut down on a lot of what we feel are mislabeled things in the agreement. Some of the things we just simply disagree with. The time frame being one of them, because they had a limit of 2 years before we were forced to go back to the Jericho site. We wanted to see a longer time frame just because there are a lot of things in the environment that we just don't control. For example, if IDA were not to fund our next application because there were 20 other applications that were the exact same, it wasn't our turn. These are kinds of things that they're outside of our control, but we don't want those to be the reasons why we are forced into a position one way or the other, be it scattered site or not. We just don't want to be tied down in that way. So we are in the process of those negotiations. Obviously, the agreement will have to come before the board before we can sign on it or approve anything. So once we have, and I think we're down about 3 final points on that in negotiations. They're supposed to be out. We're looking at dates in early March for her to come back out. Obviously, we'll get those out to the board so you guys can come if you want to be a part of that discussion. Any other questions?
What are the 3 final points, and when do you think that's going to be done?
I would expect the 3 final points to probably work themselves out over the next week or two. They're actually going to come out, like I said, the first couple of weeks of March. So I would expect if we haven't ironed them out over the email, we'll iron one up in person at that time. The points are, the first one was the time frame. They wanted, in their original draft, was a 2-year time frame. We would like to see it extended at least to 5, just because there are a lot of things in the environment that could change. We'll probably fall somewhere in the middle with some extensions, like 3 years and 2 1-year extensions or something. The second major point was disposition of the Jericho land. We had argued for the right to immediately work on and have the freedom to dispose of or lease out or do whatever else you want to do with the Jericho Circle land. They have tied it, HUD wants to tie it to the replacement of units. So basically, as we place 40 units, that's 10% of the requirements, 40% of the requirement, we're allowed to replace, to dispose of 40% of the site. Once we get to 100% of the requirement, we would have the flexibility to do as we see necessary with the site. Those are the 2 major sticking points. They actually agreed to our third item, and offhand, I can't remember exactly what it was, but they agreed to one that's something with that.
If we have questions on this, should we ask now, or is there going to be, or are we going to talk about that another time?
It'll certainly be an open topic. I mean, if you have questions, certainly you can ask now, or if you want to ask at another time, I'm always available, and I can kind of circle all those items around the board. If we need to, we can have a special meeting as well, just so we can, as a group, discuss it.
I had a couple questions, and I guess I'll ask them, and then if now's the right time, or if it's the 100 units. So in point 12, it talks about the 100 units, and then in point 20, it talks about, acknowledges that there's 32 units that are currently being developed. I'm just trying to kind of have you walk through one more time how the math works on what HUD count, like what we're doing with phase 1 and what HUD will count as, being towards this agreement, and then as we go forward, what do we have to do to basically be in sync with HUD?
Effectively, the determining factor for what counts towards our 100 unit requirement is whether or not the units are tenanted off of our waiting list. They have to, if our waiting list is used to determine where the families come from, they count essentially towards them. Of course, in the 32 units they're looking at is they assume that 8 units of the first phase will be set aside for the state waiting list that exists, and it's part of the IDA process. They have to use a certain percentage has to come from that list, but 32 of the units are at least eligible to count towards this goal. So all we need to make sure is that our residents are aware that this exists, that they are available to be a part of this.
And does Brinshore care if it's our waiting list, or if it, I mean, are they on our side, or are they financially motivated to have
It's
a different
actually
scenario happen?
in this situation, it actually benefits them to be on our side. It's for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to look extraordinarily good for them to walk around and say, we helped the housing authority solve a compliance issue. I mean, that's probably one of the things that they can say at the end of this. This is the biggest one. That they can go out, and as they're bidding on other deals and say, call Aurora, they can talk about the great help we were to them. Financially, it really actually benefits them to have us involved and use our waiting list because, of course, we provide those vouchers. We're not going to provide vouchers for families that didn't, that don't meet the criteria. So I think in both cases, Brinshore is on our side in getting this done. Don't get me wrong, I mean, they have a goal as well, that is to make money in this project. But I think as far as, their interest, I think it is in their best interest, especially as we have future phases planned out, that they, do their best work for us.
So is this off of our public housing waiting list, or off of our off of the voucher waiting list, or either, or just?
It could be one.
For Bridgeport, do they have the capabilities of just renting these to anybody, or?
No.
No, so they have to take off of our.
Yeah, I control the voucher.
Right, we control the vouchers. They have to come from our waiting list and tax credit waiting list. So one of the two.
So when we applied for these, we had some requirements on military and handicap and the like, and so how will that kind of shake out with us?
Those still exist, and a number of our families do meet those criteria. And just because we did set aside, and just said they were elderly and veterans, we have in this entire building is practically elderly families and disabled families. So we certainly, and there's certainly a need in the community where families who meet our criteria to be added to the waiting list or are already on our waiting list and waiting vouchers or waiting public housing and can take advantage of it. So I don't think that we'll have a problem meeting that requirement.
What I don't understand in that document is they continue to go back to this Jericho Circle thing. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong or I'm missing something, that when we went through and we asked all these experts to recommend what we should or should not do at Jericho Circle, they came back, I think, for the second time and said we should not do anything there. Why does the federal government want us to do something there, tying it into whatever, when it's in the best interest of this community, based on experts, not to do anything?
My thought on that, my opinion on that is that holding that, enforcing us to hold that piece of land is effectively leverage. And in maintaining that position that, if we don't follow through on what we're planning on, because they don't have a problem, they've stated in that meeting that they didn't have a problem with our plan. They're supportive of scattered sites, supportive of the approach we're taking. Their concern was that we have already gone through several iterations, even though this was different. We have gone through several iterations of this process and nothing has happened. They want to ensure that something happens, and by effectively forcing us to hold the Jericho Circle piece of land, it ensures from their point of view that if we don't follow through on our promises, that they can force us to go back to that piece of land.
But when they say nothing has happened, that's actually not true, is it? Because we've already purchased these scattered sites and, or haven't purchased them, but they're in the process of.
But I think they're not to say nothing literally, but I think their point of view is that they want to ensure that the entire thing happens.
Okay. That makes sense.
And just under 12A, it says occupancy of the unit is limited to families with incomes under 80% of the area median income. Would everyone on our list fall under that?
Yeah, as a housing authority, that's a standard mandate.
Language?
Yeah, we always, that's our limit. We can serve any family who's up to 80% of the area median income. And surprisingly, for the city of Aurora, that's an income of nearly $55,000. It's pretty high.
And then,
For a family of what?
4.
60506, have they backed off of that?
Yes.
Cause yeah, I just,
That was the item I couldn't remember the first time. Yes, they agreed with our point of view that we can disperse them reasonably amongst the entire state.
and so far on the sites that Prince Shores come up with, most of them are within 60506, right?
It's been a pretty fair split. I mean, they've done a very good job of spreading the units out.
How many do they have under contract right now?
The last number I heard was between 11 and 13, somewhere in that area. It might at this point it might be higher. I just that last number I remember.
Is it gonna be a challenge for them to get to all the way to that 40?
I could be. The only thing that I think becomes a challenge is once people are aware that oh, Prince Shores,
Jack up the
somebody's
prices.
buying up multiple units all at once. That has the potential to be a challenge just because of pricing. But I think that they've got a pretty good rap on getting units in the area.
What if we get through phase 1 and phase 2 and like we make best efforts and there's just not houses to buy, then what are the options at that point?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, at that juncture, we need to pay very close attention to our ability to purchase. If that becomes a challenge, and we need to immediately come up with another strategy to ensure that we meet this requirement. Because I mean, it either comes back to, I mean, at the minimum, that's part of why they're holding that land over us. If it comes to a point where we say, okay, we got 50, we just couldn't buy any more, then they're going to say, okay, we need to build 50 on that side.
Sorry, I'm asking.
That's-
So everyone from Jericho has a voucher that is mobile they can take anywhere.
Yes.
And then whether it's these scattered sites or whether it's something in the future that would be built in Jericho, those are all site specific. So then you kind of, and we talked, I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. So you basically kind of hand in the one that's mobile and you get a site specific one that's tied to the property that you went to.
Yes, that would be exactly the option. Basically, if a family already has an option from Jericho, we go to them and say, we are moving forward with the development. You do have the right as a former Jericho resident to move into this newer development. In doing so, you will be giving up your tenant-based voucher and will be receiving a project-based voucher. So you will actually be tied to a unit versus having the flexibility to take that elsewhere.
Is it? I mean, I know it would be different for every family, they have different opinions, but would our insured type properties be considered more attractive or less attractive than?
I think that largely depends on individual factors for each family. If being in a certain area code matters more than being flexible in where you want to live, then I think that our units are going to be more attractive. If having a new home or a recently upgraded home is more important than having the flexibility, that will make these units extraordinarily attractive because they are going to be freshly rehabbed. They're going to have new management. So it really, I think, becomes an individual choice of whether you want flexibility or you have other needs that are more attractive.
So we have 2 years.
We're working on changing that. We're going to push for 5 and probably get on 3.
So of the 90 families that were relocated from Jericho, if we were to ask all of them if they would prefer to, if they would want to keep what they have now, or change back to either one of these scattered site houses or like a potential build in Jericho, if 50 of them said no, we'll just keep what we have, then would we only have to replace 40 units?
No, unfortunately, the requirement is based on the units that exist, not based on the individual's decision. So HUD's point of view is that there were hard units that existed that don't anymore. That's where their enforcement comes in. The choice of the family doesn't really play into it too much.
But potentially building 50 more units for people that we need to replace, but that they don't want to replace.
True. The idea would then be if we built units at the waiting list, people would just come off with
Sure.
insurance.
And that's sort of
And those number of units are based on the geographic region of Aurora and how many they feel should be here.
The 100 units?
Yeah.
That number actually is based upon our initial application. Our initial application was for a 100 unit on-site development.
So the one building that we looked at down on the street that we decided not to do, would that type of development help fit those units or replace those units?
Any type of additional housing development would come towards this. So it doesn't have to be just a British deal. Actually, I mean, as it is right now, we've agreed to do 2 phases, a total of 80 units. It still leaves us 20 units, and we still need to figure out whether that's going to be a 3rd phase or whether that's going to be just us going out as a housing authority and purchasing units or our development company. So there's still a gap there that we'll need to meet at some juncture. Now, again, that we can just do a 3rd phase and do another 40 and actually exceed the expectation. But that's a decision. There's a gap that we'll have to fill still.
So when we apply to the state, they give us 40, but they take 8 of them, so we get 32 of them.
Yes.
So we really have to do 3 phases then,
Yeah.
right, to get to our.
Absolutely. There will absolutely have to be a 3rd phase beyond the first 2 units. It doesn't have to be with Grinchell, but there'll have to be a 3rd phase of development of some kind.
So the 2 families that filed that complaint, that we have to the housing authority have to find 2.
We
How's
offered,
that going?
I'm sorry, we offered to settle the case by, as a housing authority, purchasing 2 units that met their needs currently, and then placing those families in those units as public housing residents. We actually have to, and I was unaware when we negotiated this at the meeting, I assumed that we had kind of closed that issue, but we still apparently need to have an actual settlement with those families to ensure that that's what would be satisfactory and settled their complaints. I wouldn't be surprised if that settles the complaints. It may not. That's part of the discussion we'll have relating to that. Any other questions about the BCA?
What is the IDA path that we took with Brenshaw, is that the only path that we can take to do developments like this?
No, absolutely not. We're still going to receive probably, I'd say, $500,000 for the next 5 years in replacement housing money. We can use those dollars to purchase. We have $1.5 million in reserves that we can leverage. We can even take out additional debt as long as we do it under certain programs to acquire housing. So we do have options as to how we develop future units.
So are you pleased with Grimshaw the way it's going on?
So far, yes. I think they've been a very good partner. I think more so the development piece. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying anybody can do it, but there's a formula and it works, and they've kind of figured out how to do the scattered site model. It doesn't. The formula itself doesn't really change whether you're doing on-site or off-site, but they figured out how to do off-site with that same formula. It's basically project-based vouchers, tax credits. You build or you buy, and then you fill them and you match. So they've got that part down. What I'm really pleased by is their ability to kind of leverage their know-how and their connections, especially when we're dealing with HUD and dealing with some of these fair housing entities. They've been able to really close the gap on a lot of things just by picking up the phone, and that's been really useful. And 2, they've been very helpful as far as education, which has been interesting. We talked about the partnership with our development firm. They've been providing us a little bit of know-how here and there. So it's been good to have a partner that can say, well, this is how this works, and this is why we do things this way. So it has been a learning experience. So I think they're doing it. Okay. We also, I'm sorry, were there any other questions? All right. We, good news, we also just got notified recently we received the 5th year, I believe, the U of I grant. So another $56,000. We'll be doing more energy upgrades. Carlos and David, Kramer, Mark, who isn't here right now, were very good at putting that application together and making sure that we got funded for another year. Those funds have been another reason why we don't have to spend so much money on our maintenance costs, and it's been phenomenal on 2 ends. One, that it's money in the door that didn't come from HUD, it didn't come from us. And 2, because we're doing energy upgrades, in the future it decreases our costs. On both ends, this is really a financial benefit to us. And also, last piece of good news, the city gave us our permits for the Jericho Circle office, and we got to work with Carlos and Jimmy and the crew got to work immediately. Actually, we were just there last Friday, and the walls are already framed. So there were floors are stripped, walls are framed. We're making some changes to the planning, but it's coming along very quickly, and I think it's going to be a very, very phenomenal office. We're looking at a lot of new technology, a lot of interactivity and communication, so it's going to be an excellent office. Carlos has just kind of been really on top of making those kinds of things happen. Two things we have here. First, and it's not that you really didn't already have this. This is the final report from the ULI Technical Systems panel. You already had this, I believe, in PDF form, but now you have an actual hard copy that you can put on your mantle or use Sunfire or whatever. The other item we have is our, we were recently, and I mentioned the board, recently featured in an article in the Affordable Housing News, which is a nationwide industry publication, which talks about housing authorities that are doing innovative projects, different development projects. We were featured. So we actually got from them, we did pay for this, you'll see, we got this frame, we're actually going to put this up when we get our new office finished. We have, so this will go up. We also got a lot, we purchased about 500 copies, one-page copies of the article. We're actually going to send those out to different groups. We'll get those to the city, get those to a lot of the groups around town, just so people know some of the positive things that are being written about the Housing Authority and some of the great things that are being said. And again, hats off to Maria, Jimmy, and Carlos and their teams for really putting together a lot of hard work for not just this project, but for pretty much everything that we've got going on. So, and Sue. We've been, it's a great team. So.
Hey Keith, this picture just reminded me of, there's a lot of buildings downtown that have a lot of potential for apartments, condos upstairs. Are you looking at that at all? Because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, one of the things that we want is a lot more downtown traffic. And I know that there's several of these buildings that are vacant. Are you all over that yet? Have you looked at it?
To answer that question, and I've said before, I will poke around. I've always, I really do have an interest in doing a bigger development project. I like scattered sites. I think it is a better broad approach. But of course, when there are opportunities that fit our needs and of course fit the needs of the city as a whole, I think we definitely should look at those. So to answer your question, yes, I keep pictures on my phone of buildings that I like. I would love to be a part of. It's just making sure that there's a development that can be done. Because sometimes you can build, it looks beautiful, but it can only house 12 units, and it just doesn't financially make sense. But certainly, as we see, but not just downtown, everywhere, we see opportunities. We definitely look at those.
That was kind of my follow-up question. I mean, I know bigger is probably better for us and what we're doing, but if we have a unit that can do, I don't know, 4, places in it, does that fit? And I know it's more work, but does that fit in the parameter where we can start doing some stuff now before all these other units are kind of working? And what triggered this was Eric, who's the guy that sold all the musical instruments downtown?
I was reading about that. Yes.
Ziegler, yeah. I just read somewhere that he's now, he's 80 years old, but I know his place has been vacant like forever. At least the storefront has been, and I'm assuming up top has been vacant forever too. So, it's like right there, so that kind of triggered that conversation.
What I can say.
Question, I'm sorry.
No, and what I can say about that is, it doesn't have to be a big development. By no means does it have to be some 30 or 50 unit development. The challenge becomes we find it building a house of 12 units is the cost versus, and it's always a big thing for me, is cost versus reward. We build the units out, maybe we get, we do 3 units, it's a small project, but financially we spent acquiring a building, doing a rehab, we spent $300,000. We're going to take 30 years to get that back. Is it always, a good decision? And that's a challenge. But I think where that can happen more effectively is when there's a developer who's already in that area, and who's already looking at property and says, look, I have financial, I'd like to close this gap. Housing Authority steps in and says, look, we can help you close that gap as long as you're willing to do some affordability. And I think one of the real benefits there is that, again, we talk about that 80% number, and I think people overlook it and don't always understand the level of income that can be served by the Housing Authority. Of course, the common perception is that the Housing Authority is doing something that's absolutely the least affluent families. And That's not always the case. At 80%, area median income for the city of Aurora is $72,000 for a family of four. We can serve families up to $56,000 a year, basically. That's your average middle class. I mean, in Pittsburgh, that number is $30,000, just 80%. So there's a lot of not to say well-to-do, but definitely working middle class families that can be served by the housing authority. And it goes back to our upgraded units. It's making sure that we're doing work that is professional, that is attractive, and gives them something that is worth their time and money as well.
So I heard you say a couple things. Number one, the numbers need to make sense. Number two, it helps us if there's a developer in there. So my follow-up question to that is does it help, for use of a better word, our portfolio of properties? Because I mean, these are downtown, which you want to add traffic to downtown, right, Rick? These are near the train, these are near the library, near Wabansie, you know what I mean? Does it make sense, even if it's a little bit more dollars, to add this to our portfolio?
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, when I say it needs to make financial sense, I'm not saying it needs to be cheap.
Yeah.
I simply believe that there should be a return on investment.
Right.
No, I personally believe that it absolutely makes our portfolio look good. And I think it says a lot about what kind of agency we are. There is a stated need. There's we are a housing authority that prides itself on being forward thinking. So the two things put together, I think, one, it looks good for us that we're taking a need and addressing that need. And then two, it's just having upgraded units, having a different approach, having a full array of units. It looks great for us. Yes.
So if there's going to be some availability for downtown occupancy, what population would it serve? As far as the housing authority?
That's a decision we would have to make. Now, I personally would encourage a slightly higher income clientele there, mainly because of what I think and what I believe that area really would draw. You have the access to Chicago, for families who may be working along that corridor, anywhere between here and Chicago. You have the ideal that you're not going to have a lot of parking, you're not going to have a lot of green space, but you may have your elderly families who they're empty nesters now. They still got the retirement money. They still got a lot of reasonable resources. That's not to say that there shouldn't be a mixture. I certainly believe that every city should have a mixture of incomes in every area. But I think if we're targeting, where we're going to spend a lot of money, we need to be able to show, especially to the taxpayers and people who are paying attention, that there's a return on investment. And I think you can find that more so with families that are probably between $40,000 and $55,000.
That's my question is, it's so attractive, why aren't they pulling out? They're empty, that's the way I was thinking.
But and I certainly, and that's always a question. But you know what, I will say, in other, and I'm not saying, of course, I always kind of revert back to some place else that I work that isn't here, so I'm not stop doing that, but people will start talking about it. But I think, one of the things that I've seen elsewhere, not just in Pittsburgh or Atlanta or anyplace else, but even in Chicago, Philadelphia, LA, usually when you're starting to change an area, it starts with the government entities, whether it be your economic development at the city hall, your housing authority, or development, a tax credit development. But it starts something. It has to start somewhere. Somebody has to show that it can work. Developers, private developers who don't get involved in affordable housing, they have they build their entire profit margin on the guarantee. They don't go into a deal unless they know that they're going to make that money back. We, as an entity that is not necessarily driven by profits, can say, look, this is good overall. It will spur more development. And if you put people downtown, stores will follow. If you put stores downtown, people will follow. It's your Chicago downtown model. They had a lot of offices. Then all of a sudden they were condos. Now they're people. Now they're stores. Now they're shopping. So all these things feed on themselves, but it starts with people. And we have what's the one thing we have nobody else in the market has. It's plenty of people. We will never ensure people that need our I'm done. Any questions?
Alright, you'll notice our public housing waiting lists are going back up. Our 1-bedroom and our 2-bedroom waiting list is still open until further notice. We continue to get those ready to house pool numbers up. When those, especially the Maple Terrace units become available, we can get those housed fairly quickly. You'll see the notices that was served and the referrals. We didn't have too many referrals last month. We did have one eviction over at Eastwood. That was actually a 5-bedroom freestanding unit, which is one of our unit upgrades that's coming up. We did have quite a few move-ins at our single units. We only had one at the family sites. Any questions on any of those? As far as other activities going on at some of our sites, we do have our Ross program still doing good. The Ross program manager has been meeting with residents, promoting the Obamacare and helping them with enrollment. She's been helping a lot of those participants gain jobs, both at full-time and part-time levels. More recently, congratulations to Kim, she has actually been invited to serve on the Hot Martha's Advisory Board, which is going to be starting here in the month of March. As far as unit upgrades are concerned, we are finishing up work with the help of Carlos's team and Jimmy's team. The final 6 units that were up for the fiscal year of 2013. So that does include that eviction unit that was at Eastwood, which is the 1620 Grove unit, and then the one at Hammond will be the last of the 2013 fiscal year. We have already started the 2014, trying to identify some of those units and getting a head start on those. Down at the bottom, you'll see some of the events that have been going on at various sites.
So with those upgrades, is that the ones that were moving to a different tier?
Yes.
Any questions? I was asking any more questions from the. Okay.
On the Housing Choice Voucher Program report for January, we prepared 43 recertification packets, annual recertifications. So that was 45 clients. We have 88 recerts in progress right now. 51 recertifications were completed. 33 interim rent adjustments were completed. 6 families were reissued, families that are moving. We had 5 families that ported in under portability that came in from other housing authorities. We sent 6 families out to other housing authorities. We had 6 move-ins. Those were combined portable move-ins and tenants moving from one unit to another here. We did 5 move-in inspections, 54 annual inspections, 24 re-inspections, 2 special inspections, which were 24-hour bail items. Terminated 2 families. One was due to they became self-sufficient. One was a portability move-out. 3 families signed repayment agreements, and I have the amounts that they owe back: $1,703, $950, and $2,104. And 1 unit was abated in January.
What causes a repay agreement?
We get an income verification from HUD, and it's a discrepancy in what they reported and what we're counting. And so we have to verify that, and if it's due to the tenant not reporting income, usually that's what it is. We have to go back and they have to pay back to us what we paid in subsidy that we shouldn't have.
How long do they get to repay?
Usually it's 1 year. They pay a third down and 12 monthly payments. Sometimes if it's more, if it's a lot, and it's a hardship, we'll increase the time to 24 months.
When you have those conversations, are they generally that people do it and kind of hoping that it did never surface, or is it like they're surprised?
They sign at their move-ins and then they're reissued and their annuals, they sign a form that says that, if there's an income discrepancy and that they do have to report changes. So most of them are aware of that,
Alright,
yes.
so it's not surprising
No.
again, it's just,
No. And we bring them in and show them the discrepancy reporting
yeah,
and
so
then let them dispute it.
those just end up being big numbers at the end of there.
And that's it for section 8.
When someone becomes self-sufficient, does that mean we just stop paying and they start paying their landlord on their own?
Yes, first, they can stay on the program for 180 days with us paying no half. And anytime within that 6 months, if their income decreases, we'll do an adjustment and stop that. But after 6 months, if we're still not paying assistance, then they just automatically walk the program.
Other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Dean.
Maine's been working, showing how the weather and stuff, addressing the lines and emergencies. We've had, some inspections and some testing done at various sites. Home improvements that we haven't done is we're at 6/1980 Hammond, that's one of the upgrades we did. We, replaced the windows there, they're old casement windows, we actually put double hung, Energy Star. Windows, we upgraded the cabinets. And over at 620 Grove Street, which is Eastwood, we did an upgrade also there. Replaced a lot of drywall, there's a lot of drywall damage there. We installed 6-panel doors, all stains, and upgraded the kitchen cabinetry. 1640 Plum just came vacant, and that's gonna be another tier. We haven't really decided exactly what we're gonna put into it at this time. Over at Indian Trail, there was a vacancy right next to the parking lot, which would make it more accessible for the residents to come. It's right off the parking lot and stuff like that. And the old office will possibly make it into some kind of agency use. And over at Jericho Circle, when I wrote it, I didn't get the report, so as Mr. Gregory said, we got the approval. Over at 403 and C and D Indian Trail, we had to replace an old electrical box because it was just shorting out and stuff, so that was done. Over at Charles Street and Grove Street, we also had an alarm meter exchange. The city does that. And we had our inspection, an annual inspection over at 730 Richards, which was one of them that we upgraded into a and a city inspection over at Maple Terrace. One of the washers was backing up and stuff, so the bucket was on the tile and stuff, so we had to replace the tile, fix the plumbing, and and then we did have some testing, alarm testing done at Centennial House in the past. Over at Maple Terrace and Centennial House, we also had the backflow testing done, which they actually did today, which passed. 8 vacancies.
How you guys been handling the snow?
Wow. I'll be honest with you, that's obligation.
So you handled it fine?
Yeah, so it didn't break over too much of a sweat. The guys are great, they'll lots of times they'll come in early sometime, at 6 o'clock in the morning to get it ready for so this way anybody that has to go to work and stuff like that, so, that's what we do, we adjust, whatever emergency comes up at the time, and the guys, like I said, are very adaptable.
Yeah, they're contracted out, right?
The driveways, but not the sidewalks.
Okay.
I have a question for you. Concerning downsizing units, is there a policy or what is the policy for downsizing? Say if a person has a 2-bedroom, and what would be the reason to ask the resident to downsize?
Typically family composition. And it could be done at any time if you have kids that grew up and moved away, the spouse or someone usually family composition is gonna be the main reason why you have a change. And it could go either way, either you need to move up or you need to downsize. For the most part, it's that, but it could be for medical reasons. They could be requested at any time. For family composition, typically, you're supposed to report to the property manager. If not, it's done at the annual, whenever the change happens, and then they get placed on transfer list until we have a unit that becomes available. Once that unit becomes available, they're offered the unit so that they have the opportunity to come out, take a look at it, and we give them time to move on.
Thank you.
I did have one more question, sorry about that. For the insurance bill of $106,000, it says AHRMA. Who is it?
It's the Affordable Housing Redevelopment. It's an industry insurance company. They specialize in public housing insurance.
Who are we covering for the health insurance for the agency? That's pretty much everybody? Everyone?
They're all full-time employees. They don't have any temps or part-time.
How many full-time do you have?
37. 36 will have 37.
And then have you gotten that stuff quoted like you see if they're in line with the industry?
We get it quoted, actually get it quoted every year around January. We're actually out for quote now on our life insurance and our medical policy. What happens is we've been locked into a policy for a pretty long time. Hopefully, Prosper should. The reason is, we got in at a time, and based on the overall average age of our staff, based upon the years of service, and Jimmy Max, but because of those things, it's kind of hard for us to shop around. We've gotten quotes and they've been much higher, and it's just because I think the average age of staff right now is almost 50 years. So it's just kind of what it is.
Jimmy's that old?
I wish I was only 50.
I did want to. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just did want to add. There are. You notice the group banking is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
We are making, as always, I'm always tweaking things. So we have made a few significant organizational changes in the last couple of weeks. One of the things that came out of the LRAC conference that we all went to was a need to create structure that allows people to really run the agency efficiently. There have been some very good suggestions that came from our commissioners as well about this. So you actually have 4 out of 5 new directors in the room. David Kramer is not, he could be here today. But each person, Jimmy, Sue, Maria, Carlos, and David, are now the directors of their areas of responsibility. So Carlos is the director of the newly created Special Projects Division, which is all of our modernization, all of our upgrades, all of our contract management. So if it looks fun and fancy, probably Carlos. Jimmy was already the director of maintenance, so he is, of course, still the director of maintenance. So that's a lot of the unfortunate, if it's not as fun, it's probably Jimmy. The maintenance work, the work orders, preventative maintenance, systems work, making sure that our residents are taken care of, making sure their units are taken care of. So what happens, once Carlos builds a very nice thing, Jimmy gets to take care of it. We have Sue, who is now the director of our ACV program. She has done a wonderful job. As we noted before, we've scored 100 out of 100 for the past 2 years, and we're looking for a third year. So she is director of that. Maria is now the director of our housing program. And again, we've seen significant improvement in her time here with the relationship with residents and also just with our overall scoring. David is the director of our reporting and compliance division, which is all of the really boring paperwork that we have to do with HUD, the mountains of reporting and record keeping. We have an internal audit function now, so we have an individual whose job it is to make sure that Maria and Sue's staff are actually checking off all the boxes. Not a gotcha game, but just to make sure that we are covering ourselves. It's an audit thing. One of the things that HUD's big on, especially during our audit, is to say, do you have a function that double checks on the people's work? So exactly, and we now have that internally, and David is very much on top of our HUD reporting requirements. So the question then leaves, what do I do? Which becomes a lot more strategy, a lot more getting out in front of people, getting out in front of the community, and really explaining what the agency is about, explaining what the agency is doing, and just really guiding with all of your help, the direction and point of the agency. So these are our directors, and we're very, very, very happy to have them.
My question is, does the salary go along with the time?
One of the things, and of course you'll see.
I like that title.
One of the things that we have to discuss, and one of the things you will see in the next, you'll probably get it this week, actually probably get it tomorrow, is the proposed budget, draft budget for next fiscal year. So as I told all of them, there's good news and bad news, get a new title, we'll talk about salary when it's review time. So it's up to you guys to approve the budget first.
See, Henry's never run a business. So you give him the title, no money. Actually, they've done studies that say that people want the title more than money sometimes. Or they want more time off than the
About
money.
that, I vote.
Yeah.
I vote with that.
It's true. If you do extra credit, you can get more than 100 next time.
Actually, there is one extra credit.
See?
Are there any other questions?
Real quick, I just, with all the remodeling and the tiers and stuff, like, has the word gotten out to the residents? Do you feel like that is having an impact at all, or?
I would actually defer to Marie. What I will say is, I've been asked on more than one occasion, by residents, if, they can get one of the new units. That's been a big question, can we have one of the new upgraded units? So people do know that they exist. I've had people ask, not even just me, they've seen some stuff on the newspaper, they've asked my fiance and her job, about the units that we have available. So I think the word is starting to kind of get out there. I think honestly, and as we get into this next year, we do have a pretty healthy marketing budget, and we want to spend time getting out. And like I said, I want that to be a big part of this year. Is unveiling all this that we've been doing. We've been talking a lot. We've been working very hard, and I think it's time that people see the results of what we've been doing.
Actually, what Henry said prompted another question in my head on these things downtown. And he said, why aren't they filled now? Stop asking questions, Henry, it prompts other questions.
I don't think, I think it was a rhetorical question.
If we have residents now that we're servicing, if you did one of these things downtown, and this is not just for you, it's for everybody, would people want to move into the downtown area? I mean, what are your guys' feelings on that, or Keith, or whoever?
I can bet you everyone on that transfer list will say yes. If it's gonna fit their need, whether it's downsizing, especially if they're going to a bigger unit, definitely.
So downtown units would make sense for our residents.
We have Section 8 residents downtown now.
I will say this: if we open 30 units, we'll fill them. If we open them and said sign up, we would have a waiting list 2 days later.
And I guess my question is do you do 15 units like this downtown, or 1 unit that has 30 in? You know what I mean? Which one's better?
And I think, and again, I think it comes back to what, as an agency, what we really determine is best financially and best. Again,
Yeah, you gotta look at the big picture.
but certainly, I think honestly, if we decided that we set aside dollars to do this, we will not have a problem filling these. That will be the one thing we don't have to worry about. I do have one more thing to add, and I apologize. I'm going to be in a lot of trouble, so I'm going to apologize to Lauren too. And we've, like I said, there's been a lot of position changes. So Vanessa is now training Lauren to be my executive assistant. Vanessa went on to be a finance specialist, so she's got a promotion. And now Lauren, who was an HCB clerk, promoted to executive assistant. So we also have that interesting change. So you'll be seeing a lot more of Lauren and less of Vanessa.
That's good. Vanessa was just irritating. I'm joking.
Are there any other questions?
I cannot be here on Wednesday. I'll be in Nashville, so there's nothing to vote on.
No, we have no voting on it.
Anything else to come before this board? Just information. Yeah. I didn't care what.
Like I said, you
I'd be happy to highlight, or if you have any questions, talk to me about it.
We get questions,
In the 60-minute PowerPoint you want to give us?
It would be more than that probably, but I could highlight some stuff.
I'm good. Not really. Congratulations.